Hello, hello, and welcome to Inner Work for Greater Good. My name is Emily Eldredge. As always, I am here as your host, teaching you inner work that accelerates your power to change the world, to make a difference, to be the brightest possible light you can possibly be, doing whatever that lights you up, because that is what it's all about, people, lighting up. As I see it, our only job in this lifetime is to live our own truth, because when we live our truth, that's when we light up. And when we light up, that's when we light up the world. And the world needs our light. We can bring so much light to the world and make so many lives better, including our own, simply by trusting and following our own truth. So I wanted to talk about something today that may on the surface seem a little bit controversial, because it's like, wait a minute, how is that possible? And that is that, when we think about thinking and feeling, we talk about thinking and feeling. When it comes to, for example, decision making, or trying to sort out a problem, or trying to get through a challenge, or trying to make a decision, a lot of times we want to use our logic and we want to just think it through and want to process and be very rational about it. And I completely agree with that. And I really want to make a case today for the value of honoring our own emotions in that process. And here's what I mean. I'm going to give you an example. As always with my show, it usually comes from something that just happened this past week that I want to share with you all. And basically what happened was I was talking with someone recently, and he was struggling with an issue in his work. He was really feeling overwhelmed, and he was trying to figure out how to sort things through. And he was feeling very stuck and didn't have any answers and didn't feel like there was any way out. And so he'd been trying to, as we often do, figure out rationally or logically how to get through this situation. And he'd been trying to rely on his left brain. But the problem was he was so emotionally overwhelmed that he actually wasn't seeing clearly. And I don't mean that judgmentally. I mean, I could see all these other options around him. I could see all these other doors and opportunities and possibilities that he just couldn't see himself because he was so emotionally overwhelmed. Now, there is a reason for this. I wish I could cite the study, but as always, my mother, she's an amazing psychotherapist and been an amazing mentor to me. And she once shared with me that there was a study, there may even be several studies, but there was a study that basically showed that when it comes to left brain and right brain, okay, quick primer on left brain is our logical, rational, reasonable, all about language. That's that part of our brains, that's where that's sort of centered. And the right brain is, of course, more of our emotional, our intuitive, our creative. It speaks in images. So we've got these two sides of us. It's, of course, not entirely that binary, but just for the sake of this conversation, here it is. So we've got these two sides. And what they found is that when someone is in a state of emotional overwhelm, the right brain has basically crowded out everything else. So no matter how hard we try to actually engage our left brain and really think rationally and logically and try to operate from that perspective, that right brain is still going to take over, or it's going to sort of overwhelm. And the studies have found that it's not until we honor our emotions that we can help our feelings, our emotions, our overwhelm, our confusion, our fears, our anxieties, whatever's going on, our anger, that the more we allow those to calm down, then it's like our left brain can kind of come back online. Then there's more space for that logical, rational, reasonable side of us. And so the reason why this is important, and this is what I ended up doing with this man who I was working with, who was, really struggling, is that he was trying to figure things out with his left brain, which is what we often do. But he was overwhelmed by his emotions. So rather than my sitting there and trying to go, well, let's think this through and let's figure this out. Let's make a pros and cons list. No. I said, you know what? So this is how you're feeling. You're feeling overwhelmed. And in his case, what was also getting triggered was, well, he didn't know this at the time, but it turned out that what was getting triggered was stuff from his childhood, was a sense of powerlessness, of helplessness, of darkness, of not seeing his way out, of not having any sense of power or agency in the situation. So of course, that's why he couldn't see beyond, his own fears. He couldn't see the possibilities because basically stuff from childhood was being triggered, and it was overwhelming his ability to be in the present moment and see the reality for what it was, for what it is. And so I didn't go into trying to problem solve with him. Instead, it was like, you know what? Why don't we honor how you're feeling? Let's just sit with it. You don't have to figure it out. Again, trying to give permission to that left brain to calm down, set yourself aside. Just, it's okay. You don't have to work so hard. Let's just honor the feelings. And sure enough, I just sat here and closed his eyes. We sat there and he honored his feelings. And we just went in, and sure enough, he was angry and irritated and frustrated on the surface. He was irritated with the people around him and the situation. But as we actually let those feelings just sort of come up and process, and the word I even used was metabolize. It's like our bodies have emotions they need to metabolize. If we don't let them metabolize, they're just going to sit there and fester and get worse. So we let those emotions come up. And sure enough, underneath that was fear, anxiety, all kinds of beliefs that he was carrying about, feeling stuck and not having any power. And then he got this really clear image because so one of the words he used was, I feel very insecure. I said, okay, so let's notice what that insecurity feels like in your body. What are you noticing? And he immediately had this image. He said, it's like I've fallen off a cliff. I mean, this was so specific. It was amazing. It's like I've fallen off a cliff and it was my own fault. It was interesting. He was blaming himself. And he said, I'm feeling all this shame and I'm clinging to like the roots. There's that image, sometimes you see it in the movies where it's like the person's fallen off, but they're clinging to roots. And it's like, and I'm clinging and there's no one there to save me. And I'm about to fall into this ravine. So it was a very clear image that he had that was connected with this sense of insecurity, powerlessness, hopelessness, feeling very alone. There was no one there to help him. I just want to say, here's why I also knew that he wasn't seeing things clearly. He was feeling like no one was there to help him, even as he'd been telling me that the situation in his work, there were actually people who were there to help him, who were actually offering to help him and asking questions and, wanting his feedback on things. And so the point is, though, he was so stuck in such an emotional state that he couldn't think rationally. He couldn't see reality. He wasn't in the present moment. So that's all by way of saying that we sat with his feelings, we let him process them and metabolize them, and really let them come up from the depths so that he could express all these fears and anxieties and all the things that were clouding his ability to really think clearly, to really process rationally and logically and reasonably. So sure enough, what do you want to guess happened? As he sat there and he cried a little bit, and his chin was quivering and some tears were coming down. But then he sat and he started to say, here was another cool, I just want to tell you this. He also said he felt like he was carrying this backpack full of rocks of shame and failure. Now, those were related to his past. Here's what started to happen. I didn't even give him any of these ideas. This is what starts to happen when we honor the feelings first and foremost and so we can give space for the reason, the logic. Here's what happened. That backpack of rocks, as the emotions started to lift because he allowed himself to feel them and express them, he said, you know what? You know what could be in that backpack of rocks? What if it's actually not rocks? What if it's tools? What if it's tools that can help me get through this, that can help me solve these problems and figure out these issues? I didn't plant that idea in his head. By honoring his feelings, that clarity, that wisdom, that ingenuity, that innovation, that creativity, that expanded perspective came in naturally. And sure enough, he could put down the bag of what he thought was the bag of rocks. And instead of seeing it as a weight, a burden that he had to carry of shame and failure from his past, he actually saw it as, well, actually, I can use this to help me move forward into the future, with these challenges and other challenges. So it's a great example of what happens when we honor our feelings first, before trying to figure out, or I think I've even talked about in previous episodes, I always start with my inner world first before I try to make a big change, whether it's a new exercise program or eating differently, or if it's a, change in my work, or if I want to embark on a new project. I start inside and I honor the feelings, because I know that if I don't honor those feelings and those fears in advance, or at least as much as I can that I'm aware of right now, they're going to sabotage my progress. They're going to get in the way and show up as blocks or fears or triggers or self-sabotage or what have you. And so that's where I don't know that I want to say in every situation. I don't think necessarily every situation we should start with our emotions, because there's some times when it's like, no, we really need to just go straight to logic, But the point is, for the sake of this purpose, it's all about honoring the feelings first, so that you can clear and metabolize those, give honor, give space for those, which opens space then for the logic, the reason, the clarity, the wisdom that's actually there waiting to come in. It's just been crowded out or sort of obscured by our own overwhelming emotions. So I hope this is helpful with whatever you're struggling with. If there's a certain situation in your life that you're trying to process or move through, just start by noticing the feelings that you're feeling and let yourself honor those. I just also want to say too, a lot of times the reason why we're afraid to honor those feelings is because we're afraid we're going to get stuck there. We're going to get stuck in those feelings and we're never going to get out. And it's true that sometimes the feelings can last a little longer than we necessarily want them to. But just be patient and gentle, because they will move through. They'll move through a lot better than if you just keep trying to push them down. They're just going to get stuck and fester and get worse. So I always say, just honor them and let them move through, so that then you can make space for that wisdom that's just waiting, that intuition, that clarity, that light that's waiting to guide you. So I hope this has been helpful. As always, I'm Emily Eldridge with ChangeLight.world. Please do join our free community. There's a free course in there where I actually teach you how to draw out these things and heal your emotions and your triggers and blocks and blind spots and wounds so much faster, so that you can make an even bigger difference in the world and shine an even brighter light. So as I said, and always say, the world needs your light. Thanks as ever. Talk to you again.